For today's painting, I am, as always, using my Frederick's 12 by 16 inch red label canvas. And I have not prepped this or primed it in any way. I am, however, going to do an underpainting of quinacridone and titanium white. And I'm going to use my 1-inch flat brush, wet it in my jar, wipe a bit on the edge. And I'm just going to get a mixture of the two. Remember, we pull it out and kind of squish the brush in the paint. That helps to mix it, but also load it deep into the bristles, so it's not just sitting on the outside of the brush. That's how we get a nice, smooth, even coverage quickly. Now, the reason I'm using quinacridone is because it's just a warmer color. You know, and if some of the canvas shows through, I want a hint of a warmer color, just because that's what I've decided. I'm going to use a lot of blue and white and gray in the painting, and I'm afraid that it could feel very cold. I mean, it's a winter painting, so we want it to feel cold, but I don't want it to feel, you know, so cold that it doesn't feel like a place you want to be. And I feel like if I just left the canvas white, that white showing through could lend to the cold feeling. So that's why I chose quinacridone. You could use any color you like. You could, you know, if you're okay with it feeling cold, you could use no underpainting, or, you know, even a blue or a green underpainting like phthalo green. If you wanted to get really crazy, you could use like cad red or orange, even yellow. There's no rule, there's no limit to the different colors that you could use for your underpainting here. But I tell you all that just so you know why I chose quinacridone. I felt like this was a nice soft color, and that softness wouldn't compete with the softness of the colors I'm going to put on top. If I had really bold, bright, you know, intense colors on top, I'd probably want to go with a bolder underpainting. But because the colors are going to be rather soft, I just didn't want the underpainting to kind of take center stage. So that's why I added some white. All right. Now I'm going to let this dry. We want to make sure it's completely dry so we don't re-wet any of that quinacridone and mix it in. You could even get a blow dryer and dry it real quick. So I'm going to do that and we'll be right back. All right, so our underpainting is dry and we can get started. So I've got some phthalo blue and Mars black, and you can really use any colors you like. I'm going to do my sky with my 1/2-inch flat brush. I'm just going to wet it in my jar and wipe some of that off on the edge. Now this is the 1/2-inch that I use for a little bit of scrubbing, so this one's kind of beat. I'm going to keep this color a little on the grayer side. So it has a hint of blue to it, but it's very, very close to the black side. I'm going to keep the bright blue for the ground, just to give the ground and the sky a little bit more distinction between the two. Pull out a little bit of white, mix it in there and see what kind of color we have. I think I want to go a little bit more gray. There we go. See, just kind of a stormy color. And I think I'm actually going to use a little matte medium. It's not required, but it just helps kind of keep the paint a little bit smoother so that I get a good coverage. And see, I just picked up a little corner of it there. I'm going to hold my brush nice and far back, kind of start up in this corner and just start scrubbing that on there. If you don't want to, you know, scrub with the brush you've got, or you've got my brushes, but you don't want to scrub with your 1/2-inch flat like I'm doing, you could use cloud brushes if you like. That's not a big deal. Sometimes I'll press flat and lay down some of that color and then just kind of break it up with the corner of my brush. See, I'm not totally worried about covering all of the pink. I've still got some of the pink showing. And see, sometimes my color's a little different when I pick it up. A little darker, a little lighter, a little bluer. a little blacker, and that time it was darker and a little bit more on the gray side. So this technique that I'm doing on my sky here is very similar to how I did the sky in the scarecrow painting that we did this fall. I'm just taking a little bit more care to kind of fill in the sky a bit more. I'm okay, like I said, with some of that pink showing, but I don't want a huge amount of the pink. Just little hints of it is fine. Let's throw just a little extra white into that mixture, still a bit of matte medium. And just kind of pull it in there and let it streak together a bit. I know that the sky is a little bit darker than what I want, but I'm not going to sweat that just yet. As I start working a little lighter, I can pull some of that. Particularly where I have too much pink, I'll use this lighter color to start filling that in. So it kind of, fills in the pink, but it also starts to lighten the sky a bit. Just picked up a little bit of a lighter color there. Kind of scribble that in a bit. I'm still working that same mixture. I'm just picking up white and very loosely mixing it. I've also kind of picked up globs of paint and matte medium. There we go. Not trying for real specific clouds. I don't know about where you live, but where I live anyway, in the winter, we don't typically get real billowy, clouds like we do in the summer or even sometimes in the fall. The skies just tend to be really gray and a lot of times very flat looking. So I'm going for a little bit of a kind of a flat looking cloudy day. There's little hints of lighter colors scribbled in here. And because I'm working quickly and using the matte medium, the paint isn't drying very quick. So I still have plenty of time to go back and, make changes to the color without really having to paint over it. All of that is still wet. Just enjoy this part, don't judge your sky and think, oh, this doesn't look like clouds. It just looks like a mess. It might look like a mess right now, but you have to kind of balance what your focal point is going to be with everything else. And the sky in this painting is not my focal point. So I don't want to put too much detail into it, because I don't want it to take away from the elements that I really want you to look at. The sky here in this painting is really just a backdrop, still just picking up really loose gobs of paint. Just enjoy the way the paint spreads, watching the way the colors mix. Don't try to make it look like anything, don't sweat. If the pink shows, that's why we put it there, or whatever color you chose to put there. At this point, I'm just picking up white. I've still got the blue and everything on my brush. Take little kind of unexpected hints of the lighter color up into the darker area. Especially if you still feel like your sky is too dark. Let's get some of that lighter color up there. You can even go through afterwards. See, that was super light pressure. If there's any hard lines you don't like, you can soften them up. See that? Particularly here where my trees are going to be, my distant trees, I want to make sure that the sky is nice and light. That's going to create a good point of contrast that'll be really interesting to look at. Quite light right here. Oh, see how much of that black blue I still had in my brush? I think phthalo and Mars black makes such a beautiful kind of a slate color. But you could use ultramarine. You could even use phthalo blue and burnt umber. That's actually the color combination I almost used. The burnt umber pushes the phthalo blue a little closer to the green side, so I decided against it, but it could still look really, really awesome. So if you decide to do that, let me know how that goes. I'd like to see it. You can post it on Instagram and tag me in it so that I can see. I'm just gonna soften up a few of these hard lines, and then I think my sky is done. It's just the tip of my brush barely touching the canvas. See that? I'm not putting full pressure. My brush is not bending. I'm just touching the canvas about like that. That just helps kind of break up lines. Just want to smooth it out a little bit more. Okay, now we're gonna get started on the trees. I'm still gonna use my 1/2 inch flat, and I'm not gonna wash it, but I'm just gonna take a paper towel and just wipe it off pretty good. I'm gonna come into my blue and black and pick up a pretty even mixture. It doesn't matter if it leans more toward one or the other. I just want a color that is nice and dark. You could even just use black if you want, but because my sky is still wet, it will mix a little bit, and I didn't want to get like a flat gray, so that's why I picked up the blue as well. I'm still going to use the corner of my brush. I'm just going to put it down. Well, let's define our horizon first. Where do we want the trees to end? So maybe right about here. I'm just going to kind of loosely sketch that in. It doesn't have to be flat. You could have a hill on one side if you like. And I'm not married to that horizon, you know. I can still bring it up or down or wherever I need it. That's just where I'm gonna start it. Corner of my brush, and we're gonna kind of, sorry, I hope you can't hear those jets. They're very loud. Just gonna kind of start scrubbing in where those trees are. Bring that up. See how it's kind of mixing with the sky. That's okay. It's just going to help give a little bit of distance. And so again, I'm doing that kind of cursive thing. It's almost like I'm writing in cursive, you know, just kind of squid your hand around like you're being super fancy writing in cursive, which I don't do well. I mean, when I'm painting, I can pretend like I write in cursive really nicely when I'm doing this, but to see me actually write in cursive, oh, it's not pretty. Kind of looks a lot like this, which works for trees, but it doesn't work for, you know, birthday cards and thank you notes and my signature. Keep this all very, you know, kind of random. So I've got some tall bits here. And then I've got a bit that comes down, it's shorter right in here, and then it gets taller again, and there's like a little gap here. Generally, it's all getting shorter as it moves toward the right, but even within that, there's some variation. See See, I can just kind of pull the tip of the corner up to get a bit of a treetop. A little more black and blue. Let's kind of start darkening up some of this. So I'm not really scratching around like I was. It's more flat. These short little brush strokes. You can kind of tap them and bring them up like that. So this is going to be very similar to the way we did the trees in, oh, I don't remember what it was called. I never remember what my paintings are called. One of the autumn ones. It'll be up here in the information iCard. I'll link it up there. It's pretty much how we did the trees there. Just kind of plop down some of that color and sketch it up. These are very distant trees, so they don't need very much detail or definition. Just kind of the color and a general shape of a tree is really all it's going to take to say those are trees. And I might let that dry and come back a little bit later and mess with it some more, but I'm just going to finish what I started here, and then we'll move on to the ground for a minute. See how I'm just kind of pulling it a little to the side. Plop down a heavy amount of that color, and then with the tip of the brush, just kind of pull it up. My brush is not bending. It's hitting about like that. See that? I'm not squishing my brush flat here when I do that. There, I'm squishing it flat to lay down the color. If this technique doesn't work for you, or you just don't care for the way the trees look when you do this, you can do the trees more like we did in the scarecrow. This is actually, a lot of elements on this painting are similar to the way we did the scarecrow painting. Maybe it's a view of the same scene, just a different season, maybe a different angle. All right, let's let that dry for a few minutes. All right, again, I'm not going to clean off my brush. I'm going to go into the blue. I want this color to lean more on the side of the blue. Just using a little bit of the black to kind of gray it down a hint. See how much bluer that is. And I just kind of dunked into the white and just pulled out a little blob and a little smear of matte medium. Again, the matte medium is not necessary. I just really like to blend with matte medium. Good amount of pressure there, right below the horizon. Soft right there to break up that line. I'm not going to worry too terribly much right now about how the ground is meeting that horizon where the trees are, because we have not finished with the trees. I'm just softening it so I don't have to contend with it later. Good amount of pressure there. See, I'm getting that texture of the canvas. Little poke of matte medium on the end of my brush, and it smooths it right out. We do want to keep the horizon back here in the distance darker than the horizon we're going to do, or the ground we're going to do in the front. A little bit more white. Okay, a lot more white. And some matte medium. Same thing, just the tip of my brush. You can do short little brush strokes if you want to make it seem really like there's some texture and hills and movement in this ground, or if you want it to seem very smooth and flat, you know, longer brush strokes. I kind of like to use a mixture of them, like maybe some nice broad brush strokes there. And then come back after with some shorter ones. And this is still quite dark. I'm not going to want it that dark. Just picked up white again. But we can keep adding, you know, changing the snow here as we like. So it's okay that it's darker right now. In fact, if it were too light right now, I'd have to struggle to put some of that dark back in later. And I'd rather put the white over top of the dark than try and put the dark back in. I'm just going to smooth out some of those lines. All right, I gave this a few minutes to dry, and the trees are pretty dry. They're still a little tacky. There's still a few areas where the paint is a little bit wet, but not too bad. So I think I am gonna actually darken them up a little bit more. So I'm gonna get some matte medium. Again, you can just use water if you like, and some blue and some black. Just a nice dark color. I did clean off my brush because I took a little bit of a break, so there's no white on my brush. This is just the dark colors. We'll start down here at the bottom. Again, just kind of laying down little bits of that color and then break it up as we come up. You can scrub it, you can do whatever you need to get that shape up there. I'm taking it almost to the top of those shapes in most areas. It's okay if some of that light shows individually, because that will just help to kind of feel like more distant trees. So don't feel like you have to mirror that exactly. This painting is actually based on a painting that I did several years ago. I think it was the first ever snow painting that I did. One of my first, kind of moody landscapes that I now kind of love to do. That's kind of my thing. And it's one that I've wanted to do for a while, but I don't know why I didn't. I think I felt like it was too simple and, just not interesting enough. And this is definitely different. I'm just picking up little bits of matte medium to break up some of that texture that I'm getting. I don't really want the texture. This is certainly different from that original painting that I did in about, I feel like it was like 2014. I'm painting it much more with the, style and technique that I use today, as opposed to just, back then I didn't have a lot of techniques that I used regularly. I was still pretty new to painting at that point. So this painting is a little bit more me. And I think in some of these areas, I'm really gonna let those distant, lighter trees stand on their own. All right, let's throw a bit of white in there. So I just picked up a little hint of white, and I'm gonna come in here. And again, same thing. Just gonna plop it down and then pull up some little tree shapes. Notice I've gone over my horizon and into the snow down here. Plop it down, pull that up. So what that's going to do is kind of bring some of these trees a little bit closer to us, make us feel a little more encircled by them. So we're not just looking at a bunch of trees that are kind of hanging out off in the distance. We'll plop a color, and since the dark I'm working on is still very wet, it's okay. In fact, that's preferable if the color I pick up is too light, because it's going to blend in with that dark color anyway and get darker. I'm not taking it up as high. I'm going to pick up a little bit more blue and just make sure that it blends in here. A little bit of white. In fact, a little bit more white. Just bring that in there. See, I'm using these short, kind of jerky brush strokes, and it's not blending perfectly, and I feel like that helps me get that kind of snowdrift look. A little lighter. See, with the flat and then that little kind of pull upward. Makes it almost look like there's some little pine trees or something there. Super light pressure. A little more just white, kind of a good blob, and just pull that to the side. Leave a good little hard line at the top edge. I'm going to zoom you in there a little bit and show you again. So I've got this little blob of paint on the end. Just kind of start somewhere. A decent amount of pressure so my brush bends, and just take it off to the side. Smooth out that line there. I can take this one over that way. I'm going to put one more here, see if I can get one lighter. This paint is getting really thick, so I don't know, I might not be able to unless I let it dry a bit. Maybe I'll let it dry for a bit and I'll come back and see if I can kind of pop a little bit of a lighter tree there. In the meantime, I'm just picking up bits of white. And I'm going to do a very similar thing, kind of with the tip of the brush, leaving the top edge kind of hard. See how I've got a hard line there, and smoothing it out underneath. I love how it makes it look like little drifts of snow. And where you can see little hints of the pink, it kind of helps give a little bit more life to the snow as well. Let's start lightening it up back here. I'm just taking a bit of white, no matte medium or anything. I still have the black and the blue on my brush. Just lightening this bit up. And because I still have that black and blue, if I put a little bit of pressure on my brush, see, I get some of that darker color up. That's actually really nice for blending. Let's see. Yeah, this is dry right here, but watch. I'm going to come in with a little poke of white, light pressure, and see that's not, it doesn't really blend because the white is wet and the blue-gray is dry, but I just put a little extra pressure. It releases some of that blue-gray from inside the brush, and look at that. That helps it blend. So that's why I do that quite often is, you know, not clean off my brush and just pick up a little point of the paint on the end of my brush, because it's really nice for blending. See that? See how I can get quite dark if I put a good amount of pressure. A little bit of white, and I think I'm going to get a little bit of matte medium. I want to make sure it's nice and bright here. A little lighter in here, since I was talking about how to darken it and blend it. I ended up making it darker than I wanted right there. I want to maintain quite a bit of that blue and gray, but I don't want it quite that dark. And this whole area in this corner is going to look different, but I want to at least set the stage for it. I think that's a good start right there. All right, now we're going to start our trees on this side, and they're going to be fairly simple trees. Now use whatever brush you're comfortable with to make the trunks. I'm going to use my 1/2 inch angle brush, and I'm just going to use black paint. You could use the blue-black mixture if you like, whatever. Doesn't really matter. Make sure if you're using the angle brush, make sure you smooth it so that you have a nice sharp edge. I'm going to start up here, let the trees go off the edge of the canvas right about on my 1/3 mark. So I'm gonna start there. I've got my pinky on my canvas to maintain my pressure. I'm just gonna say where my tree is for now. We'll stop it right about there. And now that I've got my line defined, I can go back and apply a little bit of a heavier pressure, make it wider and, you know, adjust the shape as I need to. I'm gonna slowly widen it out just a little bit as I get toward the bottom. Don't worry about what the base of the tree looks like right now. All right, another tree right about here. Maybe I'll make this one just a little bit wider than that first one. Wider or thinner, but I'm gonna make sure they're a little bit different. I'm gonna make it end right about in the same spot. We'll say these two little trees are growing with each other. Redefine the shape. I'm gonna widen it out a little. Fill in some of those holes. There we go. And I do want just a small tree behind, and we're gonna make it look like it's behind by where it ends. If it ends down below it, it's gonna look like it's in front. If it ends right in line with the bottom of these ones, it's gonna look like it's next to them. But if we make it end quite far up, it's gonna look more distant. So I'm just gonna use the tip of my brush and kind of pull a little twiggy bit down and just end it somewhere in there. All right, let's give our trees some branches, and I'm going to use my short liner. You can use a long liner, an angle brush, whatever you're comfortable with. So I wet it in my jar, and I'm going to get some black. I'm going to go pretty simple with these tree branches. Keep my brush rolled to a point, and I'm just going to start somewhere. Kind of come out, a little heavier pressure to get a wider bit of a branch there. Actually, you know what? I think I'm more comfortable with my long liner. So I wet that in my jar, and that's what I'm gonna use. So I'm gonna pull a bit of a branch out, let it get a little thinner as it goes, kind of let it shake so that I get kind of an organic shape to that branch. And then just make a few little secondary bits that come off of it. I'm not trying to get too overly detailed here, just little bits. I'll zoom you in here a little bit so you can kind of see how I'm using my brush. I am holding it far back. Even though I'm working on detail work, I'm not, you know, cranking down on it like that. So holding it far back and just kind of let what happened happen. Let's do some over here. See how as I go, I kind of bounce my brush a little bit. So I'm not just, you know, straight line like that. I'm kind of bouncing. So as I go, you know, and it gives me a little bit more of a jaggedy look to make it look more like wood. Do some over here. This tree's a little bit wider, so maybe I'll put a little bit heavier pressure. Make these branches a little wider. Don't be afraid to let your branches cross over each other or, you know, cross in front of the tree next to it. And if something like that happens, it's a little strange, just make another little branch that comes off of it. Or you can even take a clean, damp brush and just wipe away any little bits that got outside of your control. All the way off the edge of the canvas. Just little hints of branches here and there. Little sticky bits that didn't quite make it to be a full branch. We can take some from the top and kind of, I think there's a branch up there that's hanging down at a bit of an angle. And our little tree down here, I'm gonna widen it out a little bit, define the shape, and just give it a few little branches. This is just a young tree that's just kind of starting to take root. Still using my long liner, I'm going to add just a few little bits of grass. Don't worry about what these grasses look like at the bottom. Just kind of get them on there however you want. Again, don't worry about going over top of that tree. I'd rather have you go over top of it and have to paint some of it out than make everything look squished and afraid of touching. And we can even make like a little bit of a branch. Like maybe it's trying to grow in there. I am going to go back to my 1/2 inch flat now, and I'm going to get some of my blue-black mixture, mostly blue, just a hint of black. Matte medium and white. So mostly white. Let's go over the bottom of this. Actually, I'm going to hold my white so that it's up. See that? Because that's going to help us get that kind of snowbank look on the top of that shape there. Should not have filled in my tree. Now I have to contend with that gray, but that's all right. I just picked up a little extra blue and white. We'll smooth that out. A little extra blob of white. And kind of pull a little snowbank down there. Don't worry about these first trees. A little poke of matte medium just to smooth out that texture in that line right there. Back to my long liner and my black paint, and I'm going to redefine this trunk. That's why I told you it didn't really matter before. I shouldn't have even wasted my time with that. I just have to do it again. I'm okay with that bit of white mixing in with the trunk here. In fact, I'm going to pull it up just a little bit higher because it kind of looks like little bits of frost on the tree trunk. I'm just going to smear that with my finger. There, I like that. And this tree is going to exist right next to it, so I'm going to go ahead and fill this one out too. I'm not picking up as much white on this one, but I like that look, so I am going to pick up just a tiny little speck. Smooth it on there. We'll do our little grassy bits here too. It's okay if some of that white mixes in there. Put like a little bit of a tree in there. I'm just going to hit that with my blow dryer real quick so the black doesn't smear too much. And back to that blue-black mixture, more on the blue side. but just a little smear of paint and a good amount of white. Let's make our little snowbanks there. That was a bit bluer than I wanted, but that's all right. Just get that base covered up. A little more white. Nice and bright there at the top. And let it smooth on down into the rest of the ground. Sorry, my camera wasn't pointed in the right place. This is all dry here. I just added a little bit of white there and a little bit of matte medium, just like that. This is white on top of dry paint. Pull that a bit, little tiny point of matte medium to just kind of thin that white out so it looks like it's blending, even though it's not. Just really brighten it up in a few places. All right, for these trees here, I'm gonna get a little bit of titanium white just on the end and a little bit of matte medium. I'm gonna come over here and just kind of tap it in. I don't want a crazy amount of paint, just kind of a thin, lighter color. And I'm gonna do kind of a similar thing to what I did when I was laying them down. Just kind of pull a bit of this brighter color in. I just picked up a little matte medium there. Not really adding it to the whole tree, just kind of in little areas. There we have some little brighter trees in there. A little bit of white. Back to my long liner with a little bit of black, and I'm just going to kind of dot in just a few little leaves that are kind of hanging on. Just in a few places here and there. I thought about putting some little birds in the trees, but they kind of felt out of place to me. But I do like the little leaves that are kind of clinging on. I think that's good. And then I'm going to sign up.